Okay, I'll just get to it. A little over 2 months ago, New Labor Forum published an essay on the issue of climate change and the rather fraught relationship between the labor movement and the environmental movement. In the essay, the authors argue what are really two things. The first is that unions need to get more involved in the fight against climate change, and the second thing, which was related, is that unions can do this precisely by developing a climate protection strategy of their own. Of course, the question was, and still is, what should that strategy entail? For the authors, the answer was clear: infrastructure, what we're talking about today. Green infrastructure, and more clearly, infrastructure produced on the scale and at the scope of World War II. Winning the climate change fight, as the argument went, will require World War II levels of state investment in everything from new climate-safe buildings to new sustainable transit systems to new ways of producing energy. Infrastructure is the answer. Instead of the tanks in this image, imagine wind turbines or solar cells. The argument for labor was thus all but straightforward. The sooner labor can push for new investments in green infrastructure, the sooner unions can put their members to work on the very projects central to saving the planet. So I read this article, which I thought was really good and compelling, after spending 2 weeks in Oakland, California, talking to transit workers at AC Transit, which is the main system there. Many of the workers I talked to were deeply interested in the issue of climate change and climate change mitigation, and yet for many, any discussion of green infrastructure or new investments would have in many ways not only seemed premature, but really secondary to a set of broader concerns over the labor process itself and control over the labor process. And so that is kind of going to be my point, and I'll try to develop it over this case. So I say all this to set up the following scene. On June 26, 2013, in the city of Oakland, a transit operator from AC Transit named Titus Warren stood up during the public comments period of the board meeting and gave the following performance. And I'll try to find it on, set it up.
I am the C220 ATU 192. I don't need to use the restroom. I don't have marital. I am not under stress control. I do not get angry. I am the ATU 192 automaton. I represent the next generation of your children and grandchildren that will provide the technology that will drive all the medium systems of the world. I do not need vacation time. I do not need restroom time. I do not need to argue. Immediate policies and contracts are not necessary because I do not negotiate. Automatic fare invasion and termination to all people who do not pay fares will be dealt with. Thank you very much. But for now, I represent 1.2 billion.
Where was I? So the performance is clear. I'm the C220 AT 192. I don't need to use the restroom. I don't have marital problems. I'm not under stress. I do not get angry. I am the AT 192 automaton. Blah, 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 blah. You heard it. So what do we make of this? What prompted it? Of course, the context here is really important. In June 2013, when this was recorded, transit workers were in the middle of negotiating a new contract. The sticking points were familiar ones. Workers were demanding a 10% hike in wages. Management was offering 9%. Management wanted workers to contribute 10% to their medical premiums. Workers said that was too much. The most interesting element of these particular negotiations, however, was the prominence of yet another set of issues. These were, as the poem alludes to, bathroom breaks, rest periods, and what many workers had come to deem an industrial speed-up. In a widely publicized editorial, the president of the union at the time, Yvonne Williams, put it plainly: the district was refusing to provide hygienic restrooms, and budget cuts were increasingly translating to a work speed-up, quote unquote. Of course, Apart from the bathroom issue, this raised an interesting question. What, if anything, does a speed up look like in public transit? A speed up on the assembly line makes sense, right? But what about in transit? 3 years ago, I got an answer from a driver named Anthony Rogers, who at the time was the political coordinator for the ATU 182. Anthony started by making a crucial distinction between what transit workers call spot time and recovery time. Drivers are contractually entitled to a 50-minute lunch break for every 8 hours of work. That 50 minutes often comes in the form of what drivers call spot time. Per the language of the contract, spot time is the time that a driver has at the end of each run to stretch their legs, go to the bathroom, get a bite to eat. But the amount of spot time depends on the length of the run. So for runs between 30 and 60 minutes, drivers are allowed a minimum of 6 minutes of spot time. For runs shorter than 30 minutes, drivers are given a maximum of 5 minutes of spot time. For runs over an hour, drivers are given a spot time of 12 minutes. That's spot time, and it's really important for drivers' general well-being. Recovery time, the other time you mentioned, is the time that is built into the schedule to make sure that drivers can start their next run on time. That is to say, it's built in as a buffer against traffic or unforeseen delays on the road, like if you have to pick up with someone in a wheelchair or someone is asking you for directions. For Rogers, the problem at AC Transit and at the heart of the speed-up issue is that recovery time is that increasingly management has taken to blurring the distinction between spot time and recovery time. With less money and thus tighter schedules, management was allowing recovery time really to devour spot time. For drivers, the consequences, of course, have been clear. And here's a little graph I drew up to kind of demonstrate that. This anecdote from Anthony Rogers, again, is indicative. In this last sign-up, I was doing an 18 line. It gave me, leaving from 14th and Broadway to 40th and Martin Luther King, I had 6 minutes. 6 minutes from 14th and Broadway to the MacArthur BART station at 40th and MLK. A NASCAR driver couldn't do that. Let me take that back. You can do it in 6 minutes if traffic is clear, if you don't catch any lights, and if you don't waste your time picking up passengers. Now, let's say you're 10 minutes late when you get to the end of the line and you have 15 minutes of spot time. That means you only have 5 minutes when you get there, and the only restroom you know is at Marin in Sao Paulo in the nearest Albany City Hall, which is a block away. So you have 5 minutes to get off the bus, run over to the restroom, do what it is that you have to do, and run back. For Rogers, the bathroom issue and the speed-up issue were one and the same. To paraphrase a line from David Gartman's study of the auto industry, cuts in transit funding were essentially subordinating the natural rhythms of the human body and mind to the demands of management. But of course, the consequences of what he was describing went beyond the level of inconvenience. This past summer, the ATU saw the publication of this, a report by two interns at AC Transit named Elena Kessler and Michelle Gonzalez, who are really great, funded by the Occupational Health Internship Program. The report made explicit the link between bathroom access and the health of bus drivers at AC Transit, who, like many drivers, suffer higher rates of urinary tract infections and renal damage. Drawing on a survey of 98 operators, Kessler and Gonzalez not only looked at how drivers at AC Transit coped or did not cope with inaccessible bathrooms, but they looked at the reasons bathrooms were inaccessible. The report ends with a number of recommendations. These include investing in operator-only restrooms, allowing AC Transit drivers to use employee bathrooms at BART stations, introducing restroom inspections at key stops, and improving OSHA regulations for mobile workers, which occupy a separate category under OSHA law, mobile workers, that is. Of course, for many drivers, the most effective solution has long been apparent, and that is simply to allow more spot time and more recovery time at the end of each run. The solution would, in sum, be to slow down the work. Bathroom inspections, designated bathrooms like this one, infrastructure, or more sanitary facilities would, of course, be great. But such improvements only make sense if drivers have the time at the end of their run to actually get to the bathroom. Given this context, the Titus Warren performance suddenly begins to make a lot of sense. If anything, it hits precisely on the issues of bathroom breaks, speed-ups, working conditions that were really live at the time. Of course, if you ask Warren himself, which I did, you get the same response. 2 months ago, I contacted Warren via Facebook and asked him about his performance, kind of out of the blue. This is what he said: the name of the performance, which is not mentioned, is the dehumanization of human labor for the sake of private corporations to control production. The less I value you and give you consideration of being human, you will subside humanism and take on the mannerisms of a machine. It actually gets kind of weird toward the end, but it's very profound. In their famous book, Void Where Prohibited, Mark Linder and Ingrid Nygaard make an important observation. Rest period legislation has almost always been enacted in instances when capital has accepted the fact that human beings are subject to different physical laws than machines. Capital, they argue, has in these instances understood that rest periods can contribute to productivity and to the health of their workers. Linder and Nygaard do not, however, mention the alternative. In other instances, capital's approach to the unbearable humanness of its workforce is not to offer rest breaks, but to substitute living labor with infrastructure and what Marx called dead labor. That's kind of the title. Now it makes sense. Where does this leave us? So I started this talk with an article from New Labor Forum that argued for placing infrastructure investment at the heart of Green-Blue Alliance against climate change. These investments, the article went on, should be at the scale and at the scope of World War II. Of course, the entire purpose of what I've just said has been to argue that for labor, infrastructure investments only matter to the degree that they allow workers to shape the labor process in more just ways. Will infrastructure investments come with more spot time or recovery time? Will they allow drivers enough time to urinate, pee? Will they instead come with a speed up or a slowdown? Will they relieve the need for human drivers altogether? Will infrastructure come in the form of a C-220? These, of course, are not idle questions, especially if we take seriously the World War II analogy. After all, the very thing that defined the economic mobilization behind World War II, namely a speed up in industrial production, is precisely what AC transit workers have long been complaining about. So in the same way that building a new portable bathroom at the end of a transit route only matters if workers have time to use it, debates over infrastructure must include a discussion of the labor process itself, if anything, for the sake of laboring people. Thanks.